Welcome everyone this morning. I know we have students across a couple of our different programs here at DeGroote this morning, so welcome. I'd like to introduce to you Elizabeth Long and Zaya Sumar, and they are here to talk to you about a couple of different options you have postgraduate as far as different postgraduate work permits as well as PR status. So with that, I will pass it over to Elizabeth and Zaya.
All right, so let's get started. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about a path towards permanent residence for you guys. But before we talk about permanent residence, it's very important for us to get a few concepts into place and go through some of these important things that you'll need to know before you get permanent residence in order to maintain your status and use your time wisely while you have your work permit. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to go through with you guys is called implied status. Implied status is probably one of the most important things that you need to know if you currently have a temporary status in Canada. If you have a study permit, a work permit, or if you're a visitor, okay? Now, what implied status means is, let's take an example. If I have a study permit, and I am, it expires, let's say, January 31st, okay? Now, I still need to study until the end of my semester. So what I can do is I can apply to extend my study permit before it expires. If I submit the application before my study permit expires, I have the legal right to remain in Canada and continue to study. That's called implied status. That time between the time that my study permit has expired and until a decision is made, that time is called implied status. Okay. Now the website, IRCC website says, you should apply 30 days before. That is a recommendation. That's not the law. As long as you submit your application before it expires, even the day of. Okay, I don't recommend you submitting it the day of because all sorts of things can often go wrong at the last minute. But as long as you apply to file it before it expires, okay, then you have the legal right to remain in Canada and continue on with your status on implied status until a decision is made. So let's say I don't have a decision until March 31st. Fine, I can continue to study and until a decision is made. Now, what happens if I forgot to extend my status in time? Okay, what happens in that situation? Let's say my study permit expired on January 31st, and on February 1st, I wake up and look at my study permit. Oh, shoot, it expired. What can I do then? Well, you have some time in Canada. You don't have to leave the country. You can apply for restoration of status, okay? So the normal period of time that you can apply for restoration of status is 90 days from the date that you've lost your status in Canada. Now, because of COVID, the government has actually extended that time to be around to be until August 31st of this year. Okay, so anyone who has lost their status from January 30th of last year has until August 31st to restore your status. Now, the thing about restoring your status is it's not as good as implied status. If I've lost status on February 1st and I submit the application to restore my status, I don't have status until I get a decision in my case. So let's say I file my extension, my restoration on February 1st, and I don't get an answer until March 31st. Well, in that case, I cannot study, okay, between January 31st when my study permit expired, and until I get a decision in March, which means I would have lost an entire semester. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you get your your status when it expires, you have that, you know that in your head, you put that in your calendar and make sure you apply. Now, you can only get implied status if you apply properly. So you have to make sure that you are filing the right forms, you have paid the right fees, and that you've actually clicked that submission button, or if you're going to submit it by mail, you've couriered your application, okay? And you have the tracking number, you know it's got there, okay? The third concept I wanted to talk with you guys about is the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled positions. The reason why I talk about this before getting permanent residence is when we talk about permanent residence, you will see that for the most part, it's only high-skilled positions that will give you a path towards permanent residence for the most part. There are only a few very, very singular sort of occupations, specific occupations for low skilled work, okay? So what exactly is high skilled? What exactly is low skilled? Well, maybe let's play a little game. I'm gonna say a few positions and you let me know if you think it's high skilled. Well, you can't let me know. You think in your head and I'm gonna talk to you. I'm so used to presenting in front of people where we can have normal interactions, but that's okay. I would just sort of talk to myself, even though I know you're there. Okay, so let's take a bank. Okay, a bank teller, is that high skilled or low skilled? That's low skilled. A supervisor of bank tellers, that's high skilled. A data entry clerk, that could very well be low skilled. A person working at the call center, that's just sending out financial, selling financial accounts, that could very well be low skilled. Okay, if you are a bookkeeper, that's high skilled. Accounting clerk, that's low skilled. So as you can see, it's not necessarily very clear sometimes. You know, it doesn't depend on where you work. It depends on what you do as to whether or not something is classified as high skilled or low skilled. But it's very important when you decide to take a job to understand whether that position is high skilled or low skilled, and whether it will allow you to obtain permanent residence at the end. Okay, so just a few things to update you guys with regard to rules during the pandemic. Now, immigration law changes all the time, and during the pandemic, it has been changing almost on a weekly basis. Okay, so a lot of the things that I'm telling you today could very well change tomorrow, or likely will be the next month, or in a year's time, everything will have changed. So what we do is we have a newsletter where we try to update everyone who's on the list of changes to the law. And I'll put a link up afterwards where you can sign on to our newsletter, or you can also email us and let us know if you want to sign on to the newsletter. Okay. So right now, a lot of students during the pandemic, there were some classes that may have been canceled or on hold. Normally for post-grad work permits, studying part-time is not allowed. During COVID, if the classes were canceled because of COVID, you can still qualify for post-grad work permits. Just make sure you keep the evidence from the school that your classes were canceled because of COVID, okay? If you're applying for your study permit, work permit inside Canada, you currently do not need to go for your biometrics, okay? Like I said, you have until now, August 31st, to file your restoration of status. Normally it was 90 days from the date that you've lost your status. Right now you have until August 31st. Okay, so I wanted to go over some of the conditions that you need to understand for studying and working while you still have your study permit. The first thing is to maintain your student status. You have to actively pursue your studies, okay? It doesn't matter when your study permit expires. If you do not actively pursue your studies, you lose your status within 90 days. This applies to the end of your studies as well, okay? And we're going to talk about that as well. But there are two situations where even though you're not studying, it's still counted as actively pursuing studies. The first one is if you have scheduled breaks, that's on the academic calendar, that's fine. The second thing is authorized leave. Authorized leave is personal to a person. And these leaves have to be granted by your school, by DeGroote, okay? And they can be up to 150 days, so for one semester. It's for, things such as, medical leaves, or if you need to go and take care of a sick relative or something like that, okay? It's up to the school as to whether they want to grant you the authorized leave. During your authorized leave, though, you are not allowed to work in Canada part-time or full-time, okay? But if you do have the authorized leave, then you have not lost your student status yet. Now, you have to maintain your status throughout this time, okay? So no excuses because of pandemic or anything like that. Make sure that you properly submit your application before your status expires. Let's talk about working while you are studying. You can only work while you are studying without another work permit if you are a full-time student, okay? Except in the last semester, IRCC has recognized that sometimes students just they're missing one credit and they're going to do it in the last semester, okay? In those kind of cases, you can work full-time even if you're a part-time student in the last semester, but everything else, it has to be full-time unless, for example, your classes were canceled because of COVID or some special reason, okay? Sometimes students come to me and they say, Elizabeth, I had no choice. I had to be part-time because of some particular reason. Sometimes the officers do understand about these things and they may still issue the postgrad work permit at the end, but it's at the discretion of the officer. If you can't help it, don't go part-time, okay? Once you've completed your studies, you are no longer a student, okay? So if you've completed your student, even if you're a full-time student, once you receive the first indication from the school that you've completed your program, you cannot work based on your study permit anymore. The only exception is if you're going to do another program, it's going to start within 150 days. So let's say you finished your program in April of this year, and then you decide, I'm going to do another program in September, and you've already been accepted to the other program. Then you can work during the summer program, summer period, okay? So during COVID, if your classes were canceled because of COVID and you're part-time, then you can still work, but you are working part-time during this time, okay? Okay, let's talk about the postgrad work permit. The first question you should ask yourself is not necessarily how do I apply for a postgrad work permit, is if you should apply for postgrad work permit. You only get one postgrad work permit in your life. And the postgrad work permit is something that is very, very valuable because it is easy to get. You graduate from your program as a full-time student and you're eligible for the postgrad, okay? And it is open, so you can work anywhere you like. Now, the postgrad work permit, it's available, the period of time that it's valid for corresponds, it's supposed to correspond to your program. Now, if your program is less than 2 years, you're supposed to only get it to the length of your program. However, it is recognized that a lot of master's students, you have 2 academic year programs, but it just doesn't have any breaks in between. And in those kind of situations, you should still be eligible for a 3-year program. So it's kind of tricky sometimes with master's students, and it would depend. You may, if it's 2 academic years, you may be able to get a 3-year work permit, even though it's under 2 years. But if it's only a 1-year program, or let's say it's a 16-month program, but it does have breaks in between, then very well, the officer may only give you the work permit based on 12 months or 16 months. Okay, in those kind of situations, you may need to think twice about applying for postgrad right away, because you can combine programs. Let's say you did a 1-year program and then you did another 1-year program afterwards. You can combine those 2 programs to get a 3-year work permit. Some of you, not everyone, but some of you will need that time on your work permit in order to get permanent residence. So it's important to plan before you actually apply in these kind of circumstances. Okay. The other thing that I've spoken about already is that you have to maintain your full-time status at school for every semester, except for authorized leave, final semester, and canceled classes during COVID. There may be other exceptional circumstances, but please don't just apply if you have. You have to explain it properly. We often help students deal with those kind of situations. Okay. Now, here's the situation. The timing of when you apply for your postgrad work permit is very, very important. If you have a valid study permit, then you can work when you apply for your postgrad work permit. The work permits sometimes take around 3 to 4 months to process. But if you graduated, you have a valid study permit, and you apply within 90 days of the first date of indication that you've received, that you've completed your program, then you are able to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit. Okay. Now, it's very important that you understand why I say 90 days, because the website, if you go on the IRCC website, it says you can apply for your postgrad work permit within 180 days of the completion of your program. The reason why I say 90 days is because you lose your status, your student status, when? 90 days after you stop studying. And in order for you to be able to work while waiting for your work permit, you have to have valid student status. Okay, so the deadline for you to apply for your postgrad work permit has to be the earliest of when your study permit expires, or 90 days from the completion of your program. Sometimes students will say, hey, Elizabeth, my study permit just expires a few days before I finish my program. Do I need to extend it? Yes, absolutely, you need to extend it, because and apply to extend it now. Okay, because if you wanted to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit, you need to have a valid study permit in order to do so. And in order to apply for your postgrad work permit, you need to have valid student status. So even if it expires just a few days before, apply to extend it, and IRCC is supposed to give you a study permit valid for 90 days after you finish your program, to give you time to apply for your postgrad work permit. So during COVID times, a lot of students before they would go to the US border and do a flagpole. So basically, you go to the US, do a U turn around the flagpole, come back, and apply for your work permit at the border. During COVID times, this is not allowed. You have to apply inside Canada. And so, therefore, the timing is of the essence when you are deciding as to when you should apply for your postgrad work permit. All right, let's move on to permanent residence. The first program I wanted to talk to you guys about is called Express Entry. Most of you have already probably heard about this program. Let me go through some of the basics and we'll delve deeper into it, okay? So how Express Entry works is first you create an online profile, which you qualify for under one of three programs: Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. And then once you qualify, you get into the Express Entry pool. Now, just when you get into the Express Entry pool, you will get a series of points based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. And every 2 weeks or so, the government usually has a draw where they announce a number. If your number is above the number that they announce, then you will get an invitation to apply. Then you can actually apply for permanent residence. So people often say to me, hey, Elizabeth, I've applied through Express Entry. I didn't get an invitation to apply. That is actually a misnomer. It's the wrong terminology. When you get into the pool, you have not applied for permanent residence yet. You're just a candidate for applying, okay? It's only after you receive an invitation to apply that you can actually submit your application for permanent residence. So the whole trick is not just to get into the pool, it's to get out of the pool as well. So let's talk about how to get into the pool, first of all. Many of you will likely already be able to get into the pool, okay? Under the first class Federal Skilled Worker class, an individual does not have to have any connection to Canada at all. In fact, I apply for permanent residence for many people who are outside of Canada who have never stepped foot into Canada. In order to qualify for this, you have to have at least 1 year of full-time, continuous, high-skilled work experience in one occupation. So 1 year of continuous, no breaks, okay? High-skilled, knock O, A, and B. We talked about that already. Full-time, meaning at least 30 hours a week. You can combine your hours. Let's say you did 2 years of 15 hours a week. You could combine that to meet the hours. And it has to be in one occupation. It doesn't have to be the same employer, it has to be in one occupation, okay? And then they look at your language, your education, family, and you have to meet the minimum score, and you also have to have financial savings. Usually it's around 13,000 for one person, and as you have more dependent family, you might add a few thousand for each dependent family member, okay? So many of you probably already meet this criteria and you can get into the pool. The second one is the Canadian Experience class. Now, the work experience for the Canadian Experience class is very different from the work experience of the Federal Skilled Worker. Work experience in the Canadian Experience class requires that you have 1 year of full-time, at least 30 hours a week. Okay, so 1,560 hours, high-skilled. Work experience in Canada when you are not a full-time student and you have to be employed. Self-employment does not work for this one. Skilled worker, it does, okay? So for this one, for the Canadian Experience class, it has to be in Canada. It has to be high-skilled. It does not have to be in one occupation, and it does not have to be continuous. There's a big difference between the skilled worker one and the Canadian experience one. Okay. The last one I'm not going to go in too much into. It's about the construction trades, which I don't think applies to you guys. Okay, so let's say that we have all these people in the pool right now. Okay, so I think the last draw was at the 450s. Okay, but it was only for Canadian experience class. So if it was 453, who's going to get out? Well, you might say Troop T. Well, I don't know if Troop T is going to get out because it was only for people who qualified under the Canadian experience class. And so I don't know if Troop T did qualify under the Canadian experience class or not. Prior to COVID, the government's draws, 90% of the draws were for everybody in the pool. They didn't differentiate. During COVID, there has been quite a lot of draws only for people who qualified under the Canadian experience class, which meant that some of the scores for people under the Canadian experience class have gone lower. For the regular draw where they invite everybody in the pool, that draw has been probably around the 470s. I think it dipped to high 460s just before around the holidays. And the reason why the scores are at the level that they are is all dependent on who else is in the pool. The government has a mandated quota for how many people they want to draw every time. And so they're going to skim off the top of people that qualify. Okay. And so we have a lot of competition, from the States and from other parts of the world. And so the points have been, pretty steady at the 470s if it's from outside of Canada. But for you guys, because you are hopefully going to get the postgrad work permit, you guys are lucky because you qualify under the Canadian experience class if you work in Canada for 1 year after you graduate. And so that might give you an advantage, okay? And it will also give you advantage when we are looking at the points for your CRS score when you get into the pool. So what contributes towards those points? First of all, age. Age is a huge dividing factor. Once you reach the age of 30, every time it's your birthday, it's not necessarily a happy birthday, okay? So you're going to be dropping your points, drop 5 to 6 points in your 30s. In your 40s, it goes down by 10 or 11 points. 45, there's some sort of calmness, I feel, to 45 because your points don't go down after 45. So you don't have to worry about your age anymore. The bad news is that it's 0. So a lot of people who have reached their 40s may have a difficult time immigrating under express entry. Okay, so age is huge. Not a lot you can do about age, just apply as soon as possible. Education is very important. So if you have your master's, that really gives you an edge over people who only have their bachelor's. Language is very, very important as well. If you do not have work experience in Canada, normally what we're looking at is for the IELTS to score at least 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, 8 in listening, or CELPIP to score 9s in everything. Once you have work experience in Canada that can count, then maybe you might have a few points under. It might still be okay. Okay, so the work experience that counts is the same kind of work experience that I described for Canadian experience class. It's high-skilled work that you're doing in Canada when you're not a full-time student, and you have to be employed. Okay. If you have foreign work experience, it's important to be able to prove that as well, because that will also give you important points. Spouse, if your spouse has high education, language, and some Canadian work experience, it might raise your points a little bit. Otherwise, sometimes it may drop it a little bit. Provincial nominations. So we're going to talk in the next slide about provincial nominee programs that are express entry linked for Ontario. Okay, it's not any provincial nomination program that will give you 600 points. It has to be linked. Previous study in Canada. So if you have your master's, you get 30 points, which can be very, very significant. And arranged employment. A lot of people think, oh, okay, I have my postgrad work permit and I have a job offer. That means I get 50 points for arranged employment, right? Wrong, okay? Postgrad work permits do not give you the 50 points for arranged employment. It has to be an employer-specific work permit or a LMIA. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents, you get 15 points. And then French ability is very, very important. If you have fluent French ability, you can get significant points for that. So it's important to, if you do have it, to go for the exams sometimes. You know, I have some very ambitious people who come to me and say, I don't know any French, but I can always study and learn French. My response is, unless you are incredible, you know, you have this incredible talent to learn new languages, I don't think it's worth it for you to learn French. I think it's more worth it for people to spend their time looking at other factors. But if you do have that French background, that is important for you to get the recognition and get the points for that. Okay. Trade certification is again for the skilled trade, which is not really relevant for you guys. Okay. So I want to talk about the OINP express entry streams. The OINP is Ontario's provincial nominee program. See, the immigration is generally federal jurisdiction. The federal government is responsible for immigration. However, the federal government has made an agreement with every province to allow each province to also have their own programs to select people. And so Ontario's provincial nominee program is the OINP. Now, the OINP has different kinds of programs. This is the one for express entry, okay? And so you can, if you get past this one, you get 600 points added to your CRS score for express entry, which means that you will for sure get an invitation to apply, okay? And you can apply, okay? So how do you do this? Well, you can't apply directly to OINP. You have to be first in the express entry pool, and then they have to tell you whether they are interested in you. If you think about that dating program called Bumble, I don't know, I've never participated, it's kind of beyond my time, but from my friends, I've heard that basically in Bumble, the men are not allowed to contact the women directly. The women are the only ones who can contact the men. They see the men in the pool, right? They contact them, and then the men can then communicate with them. So similarly to this, okay? You are like the men, okay? OINP is like the women. OINP needs to see you in the pool, and then if they are interested in you, only then can you apply to them. So who are they going to be interested in? Okay. The first one is called the human capital stream. The human capital stream is a very ubiquitous sort of category. It's not something where, you know, Zia, for example, is on the committee at the Ontario Bar Association and meets with OINP. And they will often ask the question, so what are you looking to invite under the human capital stream? And their answers will usually be very, very vague. Oh, we're not sure yet. We're looking at possibly people who have different occupations, different job offers. They have identified something called tech draw. So they have identified some occupations under the tech industry where if you have um, a background in those occupations, have work experience in those occupations, and your score is not that low. Okay, just because you have, for example, 11 years as a software engineer, but your score is 394, doesn't mean that you'll have a chance to get through the tech draws. Normally, they are inviting people who have maybe just under the, sometimes 450s, 460s, maybe, to apply with them if they have that background. They have also invited other occupations as well. We don't know what these occupations are going to be, but they have sometimes identified occupations, and you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher to qualify for this. The second one is for people in the trades. And if they have 1 year of work experience and their score is pretty high, then they can also do it. And the third one is French speakers. Again, lucky French speakers. If your score is not high enough under express entry, but you can also be in the express entry pool, and they can invite you to apply with them for another 600 points. Okay. All right, so moving away from express entry, I wanted to go through a few other programs in case express entry is not right for you. So for you guys who are graduating with a master's in Ontario, this program can be available to you, the master's stream. You do not need a job offer. Okay, you need to have some meet LICO, 13,000 for an individual. And you should go and do your IELTS or CELPIP or TEF as well for your French, okay? The thing about this program is, in the past few years, to be able to apply under this program is harder than getting the hottest ticket on Ticketmaster, okay? You can only apply when the program is open. I think in the last year, I think it was probably open once in the last year, and it was gone in a few minutes. Okay. This coming year, the government has announced that they want to have another system called the EOI system. So people who qualify under this program, you don't just get to apply. They're going to look at points for you guys as well. And then invite people who have the highest points to apply. So it's kind of going to be kind of like express entry, but the criteria, it may be different from express entry. And for example, it looks like, nothing's been finalized yet. But last time they showed us age, for example, wasn't one of the factors that they were looking at. So who knows what the new system will be, what exactly the criteria will be. Once we do know, we will be sending this out onto our people who sign up for a newsletter. So if you want to sign up, we'll have the link on the slide. And we can also, well, if you don't know where, just email us and we can also send you the link as well. Okay. All right. So the next program that I wanted to talk to you guys about is the employer-based programs. So these are programs, not express entry, okay, where if you have a job offer in Canada, you can apply. Sorry, this one is in Ontario, okay? So if your employer is inside the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, they have to have a gross income of over $1 million in the last fiscal year. at least 5 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees in the location where you're going to be working at, and have been in business for 3 years. If your employer is outside of the GTA, so Hamilton is outside of the GTA, okay, the employer only has to make a gross income of 500,000, have 3 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. The job offer that you have to have has to be full-time and permanent. Okay, now this is the bottom line criteria, and then there are different categories afterwards. For you guys who are graduating as international students, okay, if you apply, you have to apply within 2 years of graduation, as long as your job offer is high skilled and meets entry level wage, and as long as your employer is willing to participate in the program. When I say participate, it does not mean that they have to show they can't find a Canadian to do the job, okay? They just have to provide some documents showing that they are providing you with a permanent full-time high skilled job that meets the entry level wage, which is not too hard to meet, and that they qualify by meeting the criteria that I've outlined above with the gross income, employees, and how long they've been in business. Okay. So the second one is the skilled worker one. This is if you are unable to apply within 2 years of graduation, or someone hasn't graduated in Canada, then you need to have it's the same employer requirement, but you need to have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation, and you have to the wage has to meet median wage. Okay. There's another one for in demand. This is one of the only low skilled jobs, and this is for specific occupations in Ontario. If someone has 9 months of work experience in that occupation, they can also qualify. So again, a new EOI system will likely be in place later this year for these categories. Okay, so for this one, the again, you know, especially for international student and skilled worker, last year's every time it's open, it's only open for a few minutes. So again, they're going to change the system, and they're going to have a points-based screening system and then selection system before you can apply. What it's actually going to be, we're probably going to have another webinar on the new system when it comes out, and we'll certainly be sending out newsletters through our through our newsletter list. Okay. I just wanted to quickly go over one last program that some of you may be interested in, especially, you know, the MBA students who are entrepreneurial, right? So the startup visa is something that is the hottest area of growth for permanent residents. This is something where up to 5 people can come together and form a company in Canada. Each applicant has to own at least 10%, and together, all of them and the designated organizations should have majority shares. So it's not something where you can, you know, just buy into an existing business and just buy 10% with a Canadian owned business. Okay, everybody who applies has to have the overall majority shares of the company. Every person has to pass the English or French level of CLB 5, and each person must have an active management role in the company. So it could be, this is a program, for example, that you could get together with friends, you know, back in your home country even to do, okay? You don't have to have other people. It could be yourself, but it's sometimes really nice to have other people together with you, because different people have different backgrounds, different skills, and you can also share in the costs of getting your company up as well, okay? What's very, very important is this, in order to go through this program, your company has to be accepted by one of 3 different designated organizations, okay? So these organizations are not just any organizations. They're on a list that the government has selected. They could be an incubator that accepts your program, that you accept your company into their incubation program, an angel investor group where angel investors are going to invest 75,000, or a venture capital group that's going to invest 200,000 into your company. So if you are entrepreneurial, this is one of the programs that we can look at to get you guys permanent residence as well. There are a few other programs, and that's probably better for another webinar. I don't get too much into that, but if you are an entrepreneur, please let me know. All right, so we have talked a lot today about different paths to go on and different things. Just wanted to summarize and give you guys a few pieces of advice as to what you should do next. The first thing, if you take nothing away from this webinar, but this is, you have to have a plan. Immigration is something where you have to plan your life in order to qualify and get through it, okay? You have to plan on timing. You have to plan on what you do. And if you don't do that properly, then you will have a lot of regrets afterwards. Once you have the plan, then you have to be ready to carry it out. You know, a lot of people, the first question they come to me is they ask me, how much is it going to be for me to get permanent residence? Well, I say that's kind of like you going to a restaurant and you say, how much is dinner, right? That is just that question, as you can see, is kind of silly, right? In order for you guys to know what to do, some of you may qualify, some of you may not qualify. But once you have the plan, you can then know how to get there, okay? And it is hard work oftentimes to get there, right? You may have to study and take practice exams for the IELTS, okay? Even if English is your first language, or you feel like you're very fluent, you very well may be. But these tests often test not your ability in the language, but your ability to do the exams. So make sure you study and practice for that, okay? Because those could be critical for you. Maybe you might be okay with graduating with 1-year degree and getting a 1-year postgrad work permit, but maybe that might not work for you, and you might need to study again, right? So, a lot of things that you'll need to look at, not just a plan A, but what if plan A doesn't work, because we have changes all the time in immigration. Maybe usually we'll look at plan Bs and plan Cs just in case the first plan doesn't work, okay? The third advice is make sure you stay in status and don't misrepresent. A lot of times students will come to me and say, hey, my friend had this person who told him, you can just pretend you had this job offer and someone will write you a letter, and don't worry about that, okay? My advice to them is, A, first of all, ethically, I would never be able to represent you in those cases. But B, even if you don't hire me to represent you and you just want to do it yourself and do that, my advice to you is don't take these kind of what you think is a shortcut. It's not a shortcut, okay? It will create a sense of uneasiness, I think, for most people who understand what this means. Because oftentimes, first of all, immigration is not stupid. They can figure these things out, okay? And if you get found out that you misrepresented, you will be barred from Canada for 5 years, right? You can also, even if once you get your permanent residence or get your Canadian citizenship, you can be stripped of that status. So for the rest of your life, you're sitting uneasy. It's not worth it to do that. All of you, if you have your postgrad, you have excellent backgrounds, should have a good path towards permanent residence if you do things right, okay? So don't take these shortcuts. Make sure you go down the road that allows you to sleep comfortably at night. Finally, if your application is rejected, contact a good immigration lawyer right away, okay? There's federal court notice is 15 days if you apply inside Canada. If you go beyond the 15 days, you're going to be out of time. Also, a lot of times people think, oh, IRCC is like, we're so used to be calling call centers, calling the help desk, right? We think it's like Amazon. Oh, call the help desk, they'll help you, right? They're the help desk, right? IRCC call center, those agents, they are not officers. They give wrong advice all the time, okay? And if you base your actions on their advice, you have no recourse afterwards to say, I called the call center and this is what they told me to do. Mistake of the law is not an excuse, even if the mistake is caused by calling the call center. When you call the call center and you explain to them your situation, oftentimes what they'll say is, go and write a letter, send a letter, okay? And okay, so you say, oh, great, I'm just gonna send my letter, okay? You send a letter, but it doesn't actually explain your situation properly. You don't provide proper evidence. And let's say they reject your letter, okay? When you send the letter, it's called a reconsideration. After that, they say, okay, finally, it's time for me to shout those bucks and hire a lawyer. If you come to me at that point, you could very well have been too late, because at that point, A, you may have been out of time to go to court, and also you would have already filed one reconsideration. And if I were to file another reconsideration, IRCC will say to me, sorry, this applicant has already filed a reconsideration. We're not going to consider it twice. Okay, so make sure you contact a lawyer right away, at least to get a legal advice and opinion on what you should do next. All right, so this is our information to contact us. I did not put the link to sign up for our newsletter, but when I send out the slides to you afterwards, you can sign up there. I'll put the link on this page as well. Zia, do you have some questions that people have posed?
Yeah, we definitely got some great questions. So I'll start with the postgrad work permit. When a student has finished their program, when can they continue working? When do they need to stop working? And when can they start working again?
Okay, so when you are doing your exams, you're still full-time student, so you can work part-time. When you finish your exams and you're waiting for the results, you can work part-time. But when you get your results back and when you get your transcripts back, or the school has told you, congratulations, you've completed your program, the first indication of receiving any of that, that means you are no longer a full-time student and you have to stop working part-time, full-time, anytime, okay? Then when you get those documents, you can file your postgrad work permit. You can file, and as soon as you file the postgrad work permit, then within that period of time that I've told you, 90 days, or when your study permit is still valid, whichever comes first, then you can start working. The only exception is if you finished one program and you're going to go to another program, okay, within 150 days, and you've already been accepted to the other program, you can work in between the two programs.
Perfect. And then once my postgrad work permit is approved, if I want to travel, do I need to have a TRV?
It depends on the country that you are in, okay, you are from, okay? So some countries, you don't need to have a TRV, okay? But if you're from a country, India, China, there are certain countries that need visas, then you will need to get a visa. And I would suggest that you file for the visa after your work permit comes, because then the visa will be based on your work permit and will be for the length of time of your work permit.
So, sorry, so it doesn't come automatically with the postgrad work permit. It's a separate.
No, unless you are applying outside of Canada. But if you apply outside of Canada, you will not get the implied status. So you should apply inside Canada. It will only come with the work permit, and then you apply for the visa. I also have to be warning you guys about traveling during this time as well. There are restrictions on people traveling to Canada from outside of the country. You have to have your work permit. You have to show that either you're living in Canada or that you have a job offer as well. And this is just the restrictions now. The Prime Minister has already announced that they may impose extra conditions on those who are traveling as well. And so you never know, right? You have to have a positive COVID test before you get on the plane right now. Oftentimes airlines can give you a lot of issues. So a piece of advice, if you don't need to travel, do not travel at this time.
And once I'm on my postgrad work permit, can I take any courses during that time? So I don't have a study permit anymore, I'm just on the postgrad.
Sure. You can always study under a 6-month program. Any programs under 6 months, you don't need to have a study permit for. So you could do, for example, if you had to do a certification program that is like a month or two, that's fine. You don't need to have a study permit. You just have to have status in Canada and you're fine.
But what if I want to do, like, let's say it's a 2-year program, but each course is only 3 months. Can I do that full 2-year program without a study permit?
If you're going to do a program and each course, then if it's a program is 2 years, then I would say you should get a study permit if it's a 2-year program.
Perfect. And then for someone who is still in their program of study, but they got their study permit approved while they're outside of Canada, they started their program outside of Canada, what's the longest period of time, or what point in time do they need to come to Canada in order to still be able to get the postgrad work permit?
So there were special rules announced for COVID that allows students to study outside of Canada. If it's over 1 year, it has to be under 50% of the time that you are outside of the country. So half of your program outside of the country, half of the program inside country, even if it's online, and you could really be doing it anywhere. Okay, if it's 1 year up until April, so let's say you started last semester and it's a 1-year program, and you come into the country, then you don't have to come into the country. You could still be eligible for the postgrad, even if your whole program was outside, as long as it's completed by April of this year. These rules can always change as well. These timelines can be extended. So yeah, please email us if you would like to sign up to the newsletter group, and we'll be updating on these kind of things.
Perfect. For work experience that I want to use, I guess for permanent residence, can I use co-ops or internships?
Likely no. So if you wanted to use Canadian work experience and get those points for Canadian work experience, it has to be while you are a full-time, while you are not a full-time student. So as co-ops, you were a full-time student. If you were doing co-op or internship and it's continuous and in one occupation, you may be able to use it to help you qualify for permanent resident, for express entry under the federal skilled worker class, but they're not going to give you extra points for for after you get into the pool for your CRS points.
Okay, perfect. And then let's say I'm for my CRS points, I'm using work experience from outside of Canada along with work experience from inside of Canada. Do I still need to prove that work experience outside of Canada?
You have to prove every single aspect of things that you are going to claim. So absolutely work experience outside of Canada, if you are going to need those points, it has to be proven. And oftentimes work experience, like if you're working inside Canada, you're going to submit tax documents, you're going to submit, different things. So easier for the officer to verify your work experience. Work experience from outside of the country can often be trickier for the officers to verify. So it's very important that the available evidence is there to make sure the officer is comfortable with seeing that you have that work experience outside of Canada.
Perfect. And then the last question, going back to the postgrad work permit, I believe online on IRCC's website, it says that official transcripts are required when you're applying for the postgrad work permit. What if I'm not able to get it right now because of COVID? Can I apply with an unofficial transcript, or do I have to wait till I get the official one?
I would say you can apply and put the information there that it's not available for COVID. Sometimes you need to apply because you just have to start working, right? You can apply, and then you can always update your application afterwards. These work permits are taking oftentimes, I think the last time I checked was around 100 days to process. So let's say you can't get it for the first few weeks. It's going to take a month for you to get the work permit, but you have to start working because your employer needs you to start working. What I might do in your case is to provide an explanation about why you can't get the official transcripts yet. And then you can always update your application afterwards with the official transcripts afterwards. It's a little bit riskier. If you can wait and get your official transcripts, probably it's better to do it that way. But if you can't, you could try it this way.
Okay, and this is specific to COVID times, or this was just always generally?
I think COVID, the officers are more generous, but it's a strategy that we sometimes use anyway, in particular circumstances where it's warranted.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Zia. All right. So, Melanie, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's it that we have today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it. I want to take a moment to thank you, Elizabeth and Zaya, for this session. And thank you to all you students for participating and engaging. It was a great session, and hopefully you got all the answers that you were looking for.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. All right, thank you guys for all your wonderful questions. Stay safe, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.